Earlier in the course, I told you about the benefits of object-oriented programming. Now, over the next few lectures, I'm going to show you these benefits in action. So we're going to start off by writing some code using the procedural paradigm. This is the paradigm that we had before object orientation, and it's based on procedure or function calls. So I'm going to write some code using the procedural paradigm. I'm going to talk about the problems with this code, and then over the next few lectures, we're going to apply object-oriented programming techniques and make this code object-oriented. So you will see the benefits in action. So let's say we're going to write a program to calculate the wage of our employees. Let's declare three variables. Base salary, we'll set this to 50,000. Let's declare another variable called extra hours. Now for simplicity, I'm declaring all these variables as integers, so we don't have to worry about the optimum data type for each variable, okay? Now we set this to 10, and one last variable called hourly rate. We set this to 20. All right, now let's implement a method for calculating the wage of an employee. So after our main method, we're going to declare another method. Now our main method is declared as static. We're going to talk about static methods later in this section. For now, all I want you to know is that because the main method is declared as static, we need to declare this other method as static, so we can easily call it in the main method. So public static, we want to return an integer, and we want to call this calculate wage. Now let's add the parameters in this method. So we need base salary, as well as extra hours, and finally hourly rate. And here we add the braces. Inside this method, we want to return the base salary plus extra hours times hourly rate. I think that's pretty straightforward. I really don't need to explain this. So here we have a method for calculating the wage. Now back to our main method. After we declare these variables, we're going to call this method, pass our variables. So base salary, extra hours, and hourly rate. This will return an integer, so we can store it in this variable. And finally, we can print this on the terminal. Very straightforward. So take a look. Here's the total, 50,200. Now, what is wrong with this code? Well, technically, there is nothing wrong here because this is a very simple program. Our main method has only 5 lines of code, and we have another method that is only 1 line long. However, if we extend this program, if we add more features to it, with this style of programming, we'll end up with a very fat main method. So our main method is going to get bloated with so many lines of code. Yes, we can definitely extract some of these methods and put them in other methods in this class, like our calculate wage method. But again, our main class will end up getting so bloated. This is what we call procedural programming. So we don't really have the notion of classes and objects. We have a bunch of variables and a bunch of functions, also called procedures. We're simply calling procedures in this program. Now, let me tell you something interesting. I've seen a lot of developers, a lot of Java developers, who write code like this, and they assume they're doing object-oriented programming because Java is an object-oriented programming language. So just because they use the main class or declare a few other classes, they assume they're doing object-oriented programming. But that's not true. Just because you're using classes and objects in your programs doesn't mean you're doing object-oriented programming. Object-oriented programming is way more than using classes and objects. It has a lot of techniques that I'm going to show you throughout this course. So this is what we call procedural programming, even though we're writing this code inside of a class. Here's one of the symptoms of code written in procedural style. You will end up with methods that have so many parameters. Now, in this case, this method is not too bad. Here we only have 3 parameters. But I've seen developers who have functions or methods with 5 or even 10 parameters, sometimes even more. If you have methods like that, that's a definite symptom that you are not doing object-oriented programming. So if you're constantly calling methods and passing so many arguments, that means you're doing procedural programming. So back to the problems with the procedural code. When we code like this, we'll end up with really fat methods or fat classes. Programs written this way are very hard to maintain. If something goes wrong, you have to go all over the place, look at so much code, and figure out what you need to change. And as soon as you change something, so many things break. You will create other bugs in your programs. Another problem with code like this is lack of reusability. So you will end up with so many functions or methods all over the place. And if you want to reuse them in other programs, you have to go copy some code from here, some code from there, and then you cannot put them together because their parameters or arguments are different. It's just so messy. This is what we call spaghetti code, code that looks like spaghetti. Everything is interconnected with each other. It's really hard to change programs like this. So over the next few lectures, we're going to refactor this code, which means we're going to change its structure and make it object-oriented. So I will see you next.